Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, we're brought to you today by Boardwalk Honda, Egg Harbor Township. Shop their entire inventory online anytime. BoardwalkHonda.com. From Maine to Miami, nobody beats a Boardwalk deal. And Andrew DiCecco is here on Thursdays. We like to look at the matchups to watch. Eagles, Cowboys, Saturday, right here on 97.3 ESPN. The kickoff at 4:25. Mike and Ryan here. Andrew DiCecco on the Sports Bash for Football at 4. DiCecco, happy Merry Christmas, happy holidays, buddy. It's good to talk to you. This will be my last conversation with you until 2023, so I appreciate all your hard work and insight, bud.
See you next year.
Mike, Ryan, Merry Christmas, happy holidays to all you guys and your families and all the listeners. I appreciate everything you guys do and for giving us a platform to be able to talk football with you guys every week.
Yeah, it's always great these Thursdays. We get these matchups here and kind of pick your brain of what you're watching. Obviously, Philly, let's start there with Gardner Minshew. He will start the game. Jalen Hurts has officially been ruled as out for the game on Saturday. In your mind, how does the offense change now with Gardner Minshew at quarterback?
Well, it's going to be really interesting, right? Because Gardner wasn't there. He had a personal day earlier in the week, and it's a tall enough task, frankly, to reconfigure a game plan with a totally different quarterback in such a short week. So I think you're going to see a run-heavy approach with Miles Sanders. Go figure. We didn't see much of that last week, but I think you're going to see a lot of the short to intermediate passing game. Dallas Goedert's back. He had 6 targets for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns when Gardner started against the Jets. So I think you're going to see a lot of that short game take place, and there's a comfortability there. So and I think you're going to see a heavy run approach because it's kind of really hard to reconfigure a whole game plan around a new quarterback on such short notice. So I think he's going to have a high efficiency getting the ball out to the running backs, the tight ends, hopefully maybe some slants to A.J. Brown and Devontae. But I do think Miles should have about 18 to 20 carries. Then you might see Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell sprinkling in as well.
Yeah, we talked earlier, Ryan and I, of the fact that Minshew changes the offense a little bit, but because this will be by far the best group of weapons that he's ever played with, and you're wondering what level that will take him to, because quite frankly, Gardner Minshew has had a lot of success in terms of throwing the football in this league. 41 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. Something he has a good touchdown to interception ratio, so you're kind of interested to see what this offense does for a player like Minshew.
Yeah, he's an accurate passer. He's not nearly the runner that Jalen is. Not many quarterbacks are. But I think you're going to see a very efficient quarterback and one that has something to prove. Let's not forget that this is very much an audition for Gardner Minshew for next season, where he's going to be vying for one of the vacant starting quarterback jobs in the NFL. And coupled with the whole everything that happened with Mike Leach and given how close he was to Mike Leach, I think you're going to see a very heartfelt performance. He's going to be playing with a heavy heart and also a lot to prove. So it wouldn't surprise me if he comes out there, throws a couple of touchdowns, and really puts his stamp on that position for next year for teams looking for a quarterback.
Andrew, what do you feel like the urgency level is in this Eagles locker room to win this game? Because they're in a nice position. Unfortunately, yes, will not be playing with Jalen Hurts. They need one win out of the final 3. It certainly would be nice to get that now. You don't have to get it now. But what's the sense of urgency that you feel like you've gotten from the team right now heading into this game? And in your opinion, should there be more if you don't think there's enough?
Well, based on what I've been able to gauge, Ryan, I do think that they're very intent on going 1-0 this week. They're taking this opponent pretty serious. And I think you're going to see them rally around Gardner Minshew. The defense, I think, is going to have a very big game and inspired effort. You're going to see some more sacks pile up. Remember, they had 3 sacks. They had 3 games of 6 sacks or more in a row, which is the first time in team history that they've been able to do that. I think Hassan Reddick's going to have a big game. I think you're going to see a lot of guys flying around with something to prove because, I mean, look at the line. Look how much the line jumped even when they announced that Gardner Minshew was going to be the starter. I think they're going to take that as a slight and some disrespect given the amount of talent that's on that roster. They definitely have something to prove. I think they want to go in there and take care of business on Saturday and then be able to sort of see how those next two games, how they're going to play it.
This is, right now, there's really no way to get a measured answer on this, but to your best you can answer it, in your opinion, have we seen the last of Jalen Hurts in the regular season? Or will they throw him back out there? He is now almost 4-1 to win MVP after being the favorite for a few weeks in a row.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to depend on how this game shakes out on Saturday because you might need Jalen Hurts if they lose this game. They might need Jalen Hurts to play against the Saints. And also, you have to take into consideration that there's going to be about 5 weeks between now and their first playoff game, which would be January 21st or 22nd. So that's a long layover for a team that you really want to be able to build momentum going into that. And the rest is all good and well, Ryan, but I think that they're going to have to find a way to balance that because 5 weeks of just idle time, I don't think that's a recipe for success either. So you could very well see him, at least in a limited capacity, against the Saints.
Yeah, and we know that they have the bye week, and then there's a couple of weeks. It's almost like going through a full preseason. I mean, essentially, the 3 weeks of the preseason, and then there's that that extra week after the third preseason game before the start of the season. But we see how teams come out at the beginning of the season. They look like it's a fourth preseason game in their first game of the year. So that's something they're definitely going to have to manage. We're talking with Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 from InsideTheBirds.com. One of the things in this game, the last time they played, the Eagles, when they needed a third down, they converted. How has the Dallas defense kind of evolved since the first meeting to where they are at this point?
Well, they're a lot more disciplined. They're playing a lot more cohesive. What I think is going to be really interesting is the availability of their safety, Jalen Hurts, who's 6'4", 215, and he would be the guy that would be covering Dallas Goedert, who I think is going to be the key to the passing game this week. He's been limited with a shoulder and a back injury, Jalen Hurts. So I don't know if he's going to be available, but if he is, it's going to be interesting to see what he's able to do. Remember, Dallas Goedert only had 2 receptions for 22 yards in that first matchup. But I think that the defense as a whole, they're all playing, the front and the back, they're all playing in unison together. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time. When they last met, that was week 6. There's different components in there, and I think now you're seeing both. They're playing complementary football, and they're playing at a high level. So the Eagles are going to have to go in there and execute the game plan. They're not going to be able to unveil something like they did last week, where that was a completely befuddling offensive tactical approach. I don't know what was going on there, but they're going to have a much more sound plan of attack this week against this defense.
Well, and then obviously last week the Dallas defense had their issues. They certainly, Jacksonville found ways to go after them. What was Jacksonville able to do that Philadelphia may be able to follow?
That's a good question. So that they got pressure, and which is something the Eagles didn't do in that first matchup. They got 0 sacks and only a couple of quarterback hits. Both of them came from Hassan Reddick. Jacksonville got 3 sacks and 9 quarterback hits last week, and of course the 2 interceptions from Rayshon Jenkins, their safety. But I think that the Eagles defense really needs to answer the bell here, because that was really the difference maker. Jacksonville was just harassing Dak Prescott. They were swarming to the football. And now that given the level of play that the Eagles have shown on the defensive side, especially right now, they're really firing on all cylinders. And I would anticipate a similar output from this unit this week. And remember, this unit just had 6 or more sacks in the last 3 games. So I would anticipate Javon Hargrave providing pressure up the middle and Hassan Reddick bearing down off the edge on Dak Prescott. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a strip sack, a crucial strip sack in this game.
Andrew, I just want your thoughts. I saw you throw out a few different tweets about all the Eagles being named to the Pro Bowl. We certainly can, dissect the snubs, if you will. But what's like a good underlying story from, your perspective, whether it's a snub, whether it's Landon Dickerson, whether it's the guys at the top of the list, just, your thoughts on the latest surrounding the Pro Bowl announcement.
Well, it was pretty cool to see 8 Eagles voted in and get, it's the best team in football. You would expect that. But there was a couple egregious snubs, Ryan, in my opinion, and Javon Hargrave, who leads all NFC defensive tackles and sacks with 10 and is only behind Quinnen Williams and Chris Jones, 2 AFC tackles, who have 11 sacks. And you think about how valuable he's been to the Eagles. A couple of those sacks, both of his sacks last week, came at crucial moments in the game and really fueled the offense and got things going. I think he's just been tremendous, and adding guys like Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph has sort of given him a renewed sense of he just has is like a lot more burst and freshness to his game coming down the stretch here, and then to not have him digit sack defensive tackle in the Pro Bowl is really egregious to me. And then James Bradbury, second in the NFL in passes defended, quietly goes about his business, has 3 interceptions, the same amount of interceptions as Darius Slay, but he doesn't really talk much. He's signed a 1-year deal, and I think he sort of gets overshadowed by all the other players on that team, particularly Slay. But he's a crucial component to that secondary, and very much a part that makes it all work. And then T.J. Edwards, you could certainly make a case for as well. It's sort of tough because he doesn't necessarily have the numbers outside of the 2 sacks, but his impact on that defense, he's very much the heart and soul of that second level, and his progression has been fantastic to watch. So those are 3 guys that I thought really deserved the accolade.
Talk with Andrew DiCecco, Football 4 here, Eagles in Dallas. When Dallas has the ball, let's look at the Eagles on the defensive side here a little bit. Obviously Dallas is a team that gets a lot of attention, Dak Prescott and that offense. But what about their offense is a concern in this particular matchup? You just went through a lot of Eagles defense, the talent that they have on that defensive side of the ball. But when you look at the Dallas offense and what they do well, if you're Dallas, what are you trying to do? What's their strength against what they think they should be able to do against Philly's defense?
Right. I think it's the running game, Mike. I think they're still going to try because that was an Achilles heel for the Eagles earlier in the season. They had Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott combined for over 100 rushing yards in that first matchup. I think they're going to try. I think they're going to try the short game with Tony Pollard, force the Eagles to tackle in space. He's a little bit more slippery and elusive than Ezekiel Elliott, not a little, substantially. And I don't know that CeeDee Lamb is going to be much of a factor this week as much as he was last week because the Eagles secondary has they're going to put the clamps on him. Particularly Darius Slay is going to draw that assignment, I would imagine. But I think you're going to see them try to really control the clock, work the short to intermediate game, and force the Eagles to tackle in space, and try to wear the defense down with that 2-headed rushing attack of Elliott and Tony Pollard.
Andrew, you got, the Eagles' defensive front. They've been a problem for teams. A lot of times when the Eagles see a team's offensive line, when you're a weak offensive line, Chicago comes to mind. They got 6 sacks last week. They come after you.
Right.
What do you look at this Dallas offensive line and that matchup? John Gannon doesn't like the blitz. Is he going to have to do that against Dallas to get pressure?
I think it's going to be a touch-and-go approach, right? If they're able to sort of generate early pressure and collapse the pocket early and get home with 4, I don't know that's going to be necessary. You don't want to do that if it's not necessary because it hamstrings you, on the back end a little bit and limits your resources. But they didn't get home at all that first matchup. But then again, you're seeing a lot of different guys come on later in the season. They have a lot more fresh bodies that are able to shoulder and distribute the snaps a lot differently than they were back then. And everybody seems to have a renewed sense of a burst and things like that. So I would try it out as they play them straight up, just like they did with Chicago, and see how that goes. But if not, Mike, yes, they do need the blitz because you have to take a little bit of pressure off of the offense that's playing with a backup quarterback. Gardner Minshew's only attempted 4 passes this season. So I think the defense needs to do whatever it can to force a turnover and just keep the offense in the game and alleviate some of the burden from Gardner Minshew.
Andrew, I want to go behind enemy lines, if you will, for a second with you. You look at this Cowboys team defensively. They're a defense that, for the most part, throughout this entire season, we say is pretty darn good. You look at the last 2 straight weeks, and it looks like they're having a bit of an identity crisis, if you will. Dan Quinn, the DC, his unit has struggled against 2 teams offensively that's really nowhere near the level of this Philadelphia Eagles offense, even with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. So, I guess my question is, who is this Cowboys defense right now after, stringing together a couple of poor performances defensively?
Well, it's a Jekyll and Hyde. It's one of those defenses that it's streaky, and I think they're overly reliant on pressure, Ryan, and when that doesn't necessarily get home, the secondary can be exploited, and I think that you saw the Jacksonville Jaguars do that, and other teams that have had success have attacked Dallas through the air, and I think that's what the Eagles are. The Eagles are a pass-first team. I think that they should try to run the ball and shorten the game with Gardner Minshew, but I think they're going to take to the air, and they'll probably find some success there. But I think that's really where they're deficient. If they don't get home and they're not bearing down on quarterbacks and force them to make errant throws, they're gonna get picked apart in the secondary.
Yeah, the secondary for them has been a big problem, especially the side opposite of Trayvon Diggs. Anthony Brown.
Anthony Brown does not have the long speed, guys. It wouldn't surprise me if they look to beat him with the go route, and that they've had success going after him before. I think Quez Watkins caught a deep ball on him earlier in the season, if I'm remembering it correctly.
Well, I think part of the problem is Brown. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he might be out for the rest of the year, and they really who played there?
Nashawn. Wow.
Yeah, they're down to Jordan Lewis is hurt too, and Anthony Brown. They're both out. They're playing Kelvin Joseph and Nashawn Wright last week.
Nashawn Wright, yeah.
Yep.
Van Der Esch might not play either.
Right. So they're just depleted in that secondary, and Jacksonville just went right at the other side. But, we've seen in the past, too, Diggs is a guy that, he'll take chances. Gardner Minshew should have an interesting day. And let me ask you of the two backs, Pollard and Zeke. Everybody seems to love Pollard. I like Pollard, too. But which back it gives you more worry? If they said, you know what, we're going to run the ball, we're going to feature a guy, which of those two backs is more of a problem for Philly?
Well, overall, I like Tony Pollard's skill set a lot more. I think he's the more explosive, dynamic player. But Ezekiel Elliott, that between the tackles, physicality, that's the type of running back that's given the Eagles problems throughout the season. And I think that it can tend to wear on him. And he's really good contact balance, shaking tacklers off. And I think he's going to be a factor in the red zone. I think in this particular matchup, given the assignment, I think Ezekiel Elliott poses the biggest threat. But I think Pollard's going to have his own impact on this game, probably in the screen game and forcing the Eagles to tackle properly and corral them in the open field. So I think they're both going to have their place, but I think Ezekiel Elliott's probably the bigger threat.
All right, we'll see the game unfold Saturday, 4:25. As we know, the Eagles and the Cowboys, if the Eagles win, they will clinch the NFC East and the number one seed in the NFC. If Dallas wins, well, hold on. You still have to win one of the final two if Dallas were to win on Sunday. And then keep in mind, if Philly lost and Minnesota won, there'd be a little pressure on you because Minnesota is actually one game closer than Dallas is. So there's a lot to unfold still. And, of course, Andrew DiCecco on Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, appreciate it, bud.
You got it, guys. Happy holidays.